Recently on twitter.gov, people have been discussing the ethics of AI-generated art. At first I thought, AI-generated art, what's the problem? You got a tool, make art, it's not that big of a deal. But it turns out there is some ethical concerns to be had here, so let's jump into it. Before that, my name is Fun with Fondue. I cover, of course, news and different topics from a leftist perspective. If you're into that, if you enjoy this, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But let's jump into it now then, shall we? So this is RJ Palmer. He is a concept artist. He's worked for Ubisoft. He's worked on Detective Pikachu. He worked specifically on, the realistic Pokemon designs for that. And he's a paleo artist, so he's big on, dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff. And he made this tweet. Actually, he made another tweet originally, but that tweet no longer exists. So we're going to talk about this tweet because it has the same thing. He says, a new AI image generator appears to be capable of making art that looks 100% human-made. As an artist, I am extremely concerned. Now, at first, I'm like, what's the deal? What's the problem? If AI can make art that we can use professionally, then, yes, artists will be out of a job, but this will create new jobs because that's always how these things happen. But then, I started thinking about it from the context in which we live, right? Because we don't, in a vacuum, this wouldn't be that big of an issue, AI being able to generate realistic-looking art, not that big of an issue. But we don't live in a vacuum. Now do we? These look very good. For AI-generated stuff, these are very, very, very good. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live in the capitalist world. As such, these AI that, make this type of art, and the original thread that he actually had, here it is. Here's the original tweet. What makes this AI different is that it is explicitly trained on current working artists. So this is an important part. This specific AI that he is talking about here, which is called Stable Diffusion, is the name of this AI. They apparently got suspended on Twitter as well, which is funny. So the specific thing here is that this is trained on specific works of specific artists. So this is the AI generated. So here's an AI generated art. You can actually see here at the bottom right, down here, it has actually copied the watermark of the artist because it looks at this artist's art and, the watermark is always in the same, or it's usually in the same place. So it has also copied that. This is an actual piece by the artist. And the thing here is that this specific AI actually promotes itself of saying you can make a specific artist's art style. Just choose anyone you want, Akira Toriyama, whoever you want, just choose them and you can make art in their style with an AI. Now, the problem is, in our material conditions, is that this is benefiting off of other people's labor without any compensation. As is all of these. As are all of these AI-generated art things. All of them are using people's art without their permission, really. There's no permissions asked. Their labor is being exploited here. It's not that they worked specifically for this AI to make the art and then they're not being paid, but, it scrapes the internet for all of their art and then produces stuff without any returns to the artists. And because, this can indeed put artists out of jobs. And as I said, because we live in our current material conditions and not in an ideal situation where, if artists were out of a job, that would be fine because they can just make art and there's no pressure to produce art because of money. That would be a very different situation. Even then, you could talk about the ethics, etc., etc. But because we live in our current material conditions where people need to eat, people need to work to eat, this is not cool. This puts a lot of people out of a job and then they can't eat and they can't pay their rent, and that's not good. And yeah, people's labor being exploited like this, it's not good. It's not good. It's not like the artists are involved in this. That would be a very different situation if, Akira Toriyama, for example, here at the top, we're okay, I'm going to be involved with this AI. I give you permission to use my art. This is how much you're going to pay me, a lump sum or whatever the payment method would be. That would be a completely different situation. But none of these AIs work that way. They're just we're just going to, crawl the web for your art and then do AI stuff. And at first, because I've also used these types of AI things like DALL-E Mini and stuff, and with those, especially humanoid stuff with DALL-E Mini, they didn't look very good. You could clearly tell, oh, this is AI made. Some of the landscapey kind of stuff was okay, but they were always you could tell oh, I can tell it's AI made. So I never really saw this as a threat as such, because it always felt like, yeah, they're clearly AI made. They're never, like, none of them were good enough to be used as like illustration for anything. But now that this is getting better, it becomes very problematic and very, yeah, unethical, honestly. I personally wouldn't mind like personally using, like, let's say I want to commission a piece of art for my Dungeons and Dragons game, for example. I want a picture of my villain, and I would use some free AI art tools to get like references of like, this is the kind of composition I want, or this is the kind of angle I want. Because for me, for example, I cannot draw at all. Like I'm talking like I can't draw, not one bit. So I would use this AI to get some references, and then I'd go to an artist and say, hey, I want this type of composition, or I want this type of angle in the image, and I'd use those as kind of to work with an artist. Like, that's the extent that I would be comfortable with doing this type of stuff. And even then, I'm sure probably like some artists might even consider that distasteful, and and I'm not an artist, so for me, like, where's the line of what is ethical and tasteful and what is not is a bit more difficult for me as not an artist. And if AI generated art becomes prevalent and people lose their jobs, that doesn't impact me. It doesn't mean that I don't care. Like, I don't want people like RJ Palmer or whatever to lose their job, because you know that what's going to happen is that big companies are going to be like, oh shit, we can get illustrations without actually having to hire artists, and we can just have someone plunk words into a computer until we find what's good enough. Oh shit, let's go. They're going to do that. Individuals like myself, or who want to go work with specific artists, or individuals who want to support artists, like, those are going to be just going to be like small, like, just individual people. Whereas big companies are going to be like, yeah, we're going to take the cheapest road possible, because that's how it do work in capitalism. You got to cut the corners, you got to minimize costs, and that's not good. That's why the making of tools like this becomes a question of ethics. If you're working on a AI generated art tool, it's like, what is your tool making possible? What is it empowering, enabling? That's an interesting question when it comes to AI stuff. I guess in AI in general is like the ethics of AI in general. Like, what is the thing that you're building? What does it enable? What does it empower? In this case, this type of stuff empowers corporations to basically not pay artists or pay only a few artists who know how to input the right stuff to get what they want out of the AI generated stuff. And that's not good. It's not great. Not fun, not a fan. At first I was like, well, what's the problem? It's just a tool. But tools do not exist in a vacuum. And because we exist in our current late-stage capitalist world, this has a very real impact on the income of a lot of artists, and they might lose their jobs, and that's a very, very bad thing. So, yeah. That's what I wanted to go through quickly in this here little bit about the ethics of AI-generated art. I think it is not ethical, unfortunately. So if you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe down there. And yeah, I stream these segments every Monday and Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern European Standard Time on twitch.tv/funwithfondue, where you can see this chat from. If you want to come hang out with us, you should. We have a fun time on chat. And yes, let me know in the comments what you thought about this. And on the screen, you should see another one of my videos. You should check it out. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. See you in the next one. Bye.